come into the room. If you need Spanish translation, as always, please look down at the bottom bar for the interpretation globe, and you can click on that. Many thanks to Claudia Rangel. She is our translator, and we sure appreciate her time and help. We love it when you come in. If you could put where you're calling in from, and this will be recorded. So if you want a recording, we'll be sending that out. Miguel, por favor.
Hola a todos, muchas gracias por juntarse a un nuevo webinar
Hello,
del Día Mundial de
everyone.
las Aves
Thank you for
Migratorias, en
joining
este
to yet
día
another webinar of the
particularmente la relación de las
World
gatos y
Bird
las aves.
Migratory
Todos estamos
Bird.
muy
We're going to
emocionados
talk
tras
about cats
de
and birds
nuestros
today. We're very excited
mascotas más preciadas también
to
amigas de las aves. Y
know
solo
how to
para
make our most
aquellos que
precious
hablan
pets
español y
friends of
necesitan
birds
traducción durante
to
la
those that need
presentación,
translation
usted
to
va a poder
Spanish
encontrar
during
esta
the
opción en la
presentation. You'll
parte
be able
baja
to
del
find
Zoom.
the interpreting
Encontrará una figura similar a
icon
un panel,
in the
a
lower
un globo
part of your
terráqueo.
screen.
En
It's a
ese globo
globe
terráqueo usted da
icon.
clic
If you
y
click on it, you can
selecciona el
select the
idioma de
channel
preferencia.
of the language
Durante
you
la traducción
prefer
vamos a tener
to listen to.
presentadores que
We
hablan
are going
principalmente en
to have
inglés, así que usted podrá
speakers
seleccionar el
mostly
idioma en
in
español
English,
para
so
seguir
you can
la
select the
traducción. Ahí
Spanish
estará nuestra
channel to
traductora
listen
Claudia,
to
que
the
siempre hace un excelente
translation,
trabajo.
and Claudia will be there.
Bienvenidos a todos y estaremos en el chat ayudando a
Thank
responder sus
you,
preguntas,
everyone, and we'll
comentarios
be
y por
answering your
supuesto,
questions in the
déjanos saber
chat.
de dónde vienen.
And let us
Siempre
know where
conocer
you're logging
en
in.
dónde está
We're
nuestro
always very
público y de esa
excited to
manera
know
poder
who's
llegar a
listening
cada
from
uno de sus
where.
hogares.
Thank you, Miguel. And yes, please put your greetings and where you're from in the chat box. And later on, you can put your questions in there. We do ask that you're on mute as well, so we appreciate that. Love seeing you. Hi, Murray. It's great to see you from Starkville, Mississippi. We have some people from Colorado, where the Migratory Bird Day and Environment for the Americas are based. So that's fun. From Honduras, from Peru. Thank you, Nazario. Chandra, it's been fun communicating with you by email about your birds. And Sarah Schweitzer is on. She was a recent awardee with Partners in Flight for her amazing conservation work. Thanks, Sarah, for joining us. And Roxanne Bogart, who is in charge of our Urban Bird City programs with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service from Hadley, Massachusetts. Thanks, Roxanne, for being here today. So we'll give folks just a minute more. I know I still see people in the waiting room. And again, if you've just come in and you need Spanish translation, please look at the bottom of your Zoom screen and there's an interpretation globe. You can select that globe and go into the interpretation for Spanish interpretation. There's more.
Excelente, y continuamos recibiendo mensajes de todo el público. Esta vez nos saludan desde Colombia, Jamundí. También desde Perú, saludos, Joana. Honduras, Centroamérica. Estamos muy emocionados de tenerlos acá. Si usted está juntándose al webinar en este momento, por favor, déjenos compartir que tenemos traducción simultánea para usted. En el día de hoy los presentadores hablarán principalmente en inglés, pero usted podrá encontrar esta traducción en la parte baja de su
But you'll be
Zoom,
able to
eligiendo el
find
icono similar
the
a un globo
proper
terráqueo
channel
y eligiendo el idioma de su
depending on the
preferencia.
language that you want to
Saludos a
hear
todos y
if you click on the
bienvenidos.
globe icon. Welcome,
Thank you,
everyone.
Miguel. And Miguel is our Latin American coordinator, so many thanks to him. For his great work. This past weekend was the official World Migratory Bird Day, and there'll be more events coming along. We have a great event map that we'll be sharing with you. So thanks so much for those of you who have already participated or plan to participate. Um, we're looking forward to everything that you do. All right, I think that we're good to go here. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of information about our program, World Migratory Bird Day, and our theme this year, Shared Spaces, Creating Bird-Friendly Cities and Communities. Coming up next, I just want to let you know we are going to be talking about native plants, gardens, and birds, and how you can make your yard or your parks and your community a better place for birds. In July, we're going to take a break and have no webinar in July. We know you'll all be out enjoying the summer and doing things. So we're going to get back to it in August with Be the Solution to Plastic Pollution. So we'll look forward to seeing you again in June and then again in August. I want to introduce you to our Environment for the Americas World Migratory Bird Day team. Our amazing team works all over the Western Hemisphere, from Canada to Argentina and the Caribbean. We have Miguel, who is assisting from Venezuela. We have Daniela Sosa in Mexico and Laura Babulal in Trinidad and Tobago. We work with Nature Canada in Canada, and then, of course, our organization, Environment for the Americas, in the United States. And so we collaborate and work together. We also work with partners around the world with the Convention on Migratory Species, the African Eurasian Water Bird Agreement, and the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership. So we have lots of partners. It's a global event. We want to let you know that we appreciate your support. We've had a great outpouring of support. Host a Migratory Bird Day education program or event or festival, but need a little bit of help with education materials. So you can see some of the great ways our education materials are used. This is Miguel with one of his groups in Venezuela. So you can see they've received this year's poster and education materials, and also some information about the ways that you can help birds at home. Our goal is to reach communities and to help them work in their community. Please do so. We'd love to have you donate to that effort. And also, many thanks to our sponsors. These are the organizations and agencies and foundations and other programs that help make World Migratory Bird Day and all of our education work possible. So we really appreciate all the support that you've given to us and the ability to work with so many wonderful groups across the Western Hemisphere and, now around the world as well. A little bit about Environment for the Americas. We have four pillars for our organization: is that we work for conservation, for education, to inspire the next generation of conservationists, and to help communities, you know, do protection for birds and their habitats. So World Migratory Bird Day serves as a call to action. It's a wonderful way for you to highlight threats to birds in your community, to engage your citizens, and to make headway in terms of helping to protect birds. Over the years, we have focused on different conservation themes, and it's just every one of them is so special and so fun, and you can really pick up on any of them. So last year we had Protect Insects, Protect Birds. We have addressed plastics with our Be the Solution to Plastic Pollution. We've looked at the value of partnerships in bird conservation, as well as the impacts of light pollution on night flying migratory birds. These themes are universal, they're global, they're things that we can all work on together. And I want to also give a shout out to all the amazing artists who have done these pieces of art. We've had artists from Haiti, from Cuba, from Mexico, Argentina, the United States, Canada, the Caribbean. So just all over the Western Hemisphere. It's been a wonderful delight to work with each and every one of them. And again, this year with our shared spaces, creating bird-friendly cities and communities, our artist Ana Maria Savarino did an amazing job with this piece of art. I want to point out that this is one of the first pieces that includes some actions that you can take for birds. And you'll see them tucked in there. You see a little kitty behind a window and some window dots to help birds see windows. So you can use this very much as an education piece in your programs. I'm going to take a little break because I still see people coming into the room. I want to remind you that if you need Spanish translation, please go down to the bottom of your screen and choose the globe, and you can listen to this in Spanish. Thank you to Claudia Rangel for her translation. She does an amazing job for us, and we really appreciate her support. Miguel, would you like to provide that in Spanish?
Sí, finalmente queremos
Yes.
informarle a las personas que
So
esta
we
experiencia
also
de
want
ahora es
to
solo que la
let you
transmisión
everyone
será
know
principalmente
who's
en
joining that
inglés, por
the
lo cual
presentation will be
tenemos
mostly in
traducción y
English.
simultánea para
So we
ustedes.
have
Podrá
interpreting
encontrar
available,
traducción en la
and you'll be able to find it in the lower side of your screen in the menu bar. If you don't see a globe there, then you can click on the three dots that says more, and you can select the globe icon there, and you can select the channel
Thank you,
in
Miguel.
of the
And so
language
put
that
any
you want to listen
questions
to
in the
the
chat box.
presentation.
We love having you introduce yourselves and knowing where you came from. And we'll be taking questions at the end of our presentation. But for now, we're going to turn it over to our speakers. We'll start with Jonathan Lossos, the author of The Cat's Meow. We'll then turn it over to Grant Sizemore with the American Bird Conservancy. And then we'll end with Albert and his Bengal cat, Mia. And we'll take questions and we'll announce the Cats Away competition winners. So if you submitted a photo of your cat with some words about it and how you keep it away from birds, you'll find out who won this competition. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jonathan Lossos. Jonathan is an evolutionary biologist. He's known for his research on how lizards rapidly evolve to adapt to changing environments. He's also the William H. Danforth Distinguished University Professor at Washington University and the director of the Living Earth Collaborative, a biodiversity partnership between the university, the St. Louis Zoo, and the Missouri Botanical Garden. We're really looking forward to hearing his perspectives on cats, and you'll learn more about his book, The Cat's Meow. So with that, Jonathan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, awesome, Susan. Thank you so much for the invitation to this wonderful event. Um, so you actually took away my first two slides. People who hear that I'm talking about cats are surprised because I've spent my career studying how lizards evolve. However, next slide. I am a cat enthusiast, and a couple of years ago, I had the idea of writing a book on the science of cats, how we know what we know about cats. And so I wrote this book, The Cat's Meow, and its subtitle is How Cats Evolved from the Savannah to Your Sofa. And so that's what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes, how they evolved from the savannah to your sofa. Next slide. So here's the first feline that we know of. It's a fossil species, Proilurus lemonensis. It occurred about 30 million years ago. And as this artist's reconstruction indicates, it was clearly a cat. There are certainly a few skeletal differences between Proilurus and modern cats, but it essentially was a cat. There would be no mistaking that. It had all the major cat features. And that's a hallmark of feline evolution. Ever since they appeared, a cat has been a cat. They found a winning formula and they've stuck with it. Next, please. So for the first 10 million years of their existence, not much happened in the feline world. A couple more species of Proilurus evolved, but that was about it. But 20 million years ago, there was a major break in the cat world. Two different branches of the cat lineage evolved. Next. One of those was the saber-toothed cats. You're probably familiar with them from the Ice Age movies, or if you're a little older, maybe the Flintstones. And this is the largest species of feline ever to have lived. It is the South American saber-toothed cat, which weighed nearly half a ton, larger than any cat today. Next slide. In North America, we had a species only slightly smaller, the North American saber-toothed cat. It's pictured here at the La Brea Tar Pits, which are in Los Angeles. And the saber-toothed cats were here as recently as 11,000 years ago. The first people to arrive in North America undoubtedly encountered them. Next slide. So one side of the cat evolutionary tree are the saber-toothed cats. The other are the modern cats. They're called cone-toothed cats because their teeth are normal. They're normally normal sized in shape. And all modern day species are on this side of the evolutionary tree. And in fact, for most of the time that cats have existed, the saber-toothed cats were much more abundant and more diverse than the cone-toothed cats. However, the saber-toothed cats are now gone. Next slide. They went extinct, as I said, relatively recently. I like to think, though, what if it had gone the other way? Next slide. What if it was the cone-toothed cats that went extinct and we still had saber-toothed cats? Well, I'd like to think, next slide, that we'd have saber-toothed house cats. But sadly, we don't. Next slide. We have the other cats. And this is an evolutionary tree of all of the living species of cats. Comparisons of their DNA tells us that the ancestor of all of them occurred about 11 million years ago. And today there are 42 species. This slide is out of date. It said 37. There are now 42 species. Next slide. And everyone is familiar with the big cats. Those are the stars of the cat world. Those are the ones that have their own National Geographic week, and everyone knows lions and tigers and jaguars and leopards. But there are only 9 of these cats. That leaves another 33 species that are the small cats. Next slide. And people are familiar with a few of them, say the ocelot and the bobcat, but most people have never heard of most species of small cat. Next slide. For example, who has ever heard of the oncilla, the marbled cat, the Andean cat, the flat-headed cat, and so on? Most small cats, no one's heard of them. In fact, scientists know very little about them because they're very secretive. So there are lots of small cats, mostly in Asia, Africa, and South America. Next slide. Which one of them is the ancestor of the domestic cat? Next slide. Well, it has long been presumed that ancestor is the wild cat, Felis sylvestris. Now, I need to mention something here. That wildcat is the name of a particular species. It's not just a term for any wild cat. It's not the greatest name because of the confusion, but it's a particular species, Felis sylvestris. And people have long thought that this was the ancestor of the domestic cat because, as you can see, it looks like a lot like a domestic cat. Next slide. And when we look at the DNA, next slide, we can see that that is correct. Next slide. Right here, we see at the very top, the domestic cat and the wild cat are very closely related. So in fact, the domestic cat did evolve from the wild cat. Next slide. But that doesn't really answer the question entirely because there are different wildcats in different parts of the world. There's the European wildcat, the Asian wildcat, and the African wildcat. Which one is the ancestor? Next slide. Well, the DNA has actually revealed the relationships of wildcats with a couple of surprises. It turns out that the African wildcat is actually 2 distinct types that are genetically quite distinct, the northern and the southern African wildcat. In addition, the Chinese mountain cat is also a wildcat. So there are actually 5 different types. Next slide. And these 5 different types of wildcats live in different parts of the world. So the question is, which one is the ancestor, and thus, where did the domestic cat originate? Next slide. Well, the DNA makes clear the domestic cat evolved from the North African wildcat. In fact, their DNA is almost indistinguishable. There are very few differences that distinguish always between a North African wildcat and a domestic cat. Very clearly, that's who the ancestor is. Next slide. And here is the North African wildcat. And as you can see, it looks a lot like a domestic cat. I like to say, if you looked out your window and saw one of these guys, you wouldn't say, "What's an African wildcat doing in my backyard?" Rather, you'd say, "That's a really cool cat. I've never seen one quite like it." I mean, that's how similar they are. Next slide. And the fact that they descended from the North African wildcat, the domestic cats, did make sense. Next slide, because the range of the North African wildcat in the light blue here is not only North Africa but southwestern Asia, including the Middle East. Next slide, and the area that we call, next slide, the Fertile Crescents. And the Fertile Crescent is where civilization first began, where people gave up their nomadic ways, they settled down, lived in villages, and started agriculture. Next slide. And as you know, farmers grow as much food as they can in the good times so they can store the excess for the lean times during the winters and so on. And so you can imagine they built these little huts to store all their extra food. Next slide. And you can imagine what that attracted. Of course, it attracted rats and mice and other rodents. Next slide. And in turn, that attracted North African wildcats. Now, not every North African wildcat, but those that were the boldest, the most willing to go into villages and be around people. We now know that many animals, just like humans, have different personalities, that one individual differs from their others. And so the ones that were bolder, less afraid of people, they would enter the villages, they would get the bounty of rodent food available, and so they would eat more and they would have more kittens, and they would pass those genes on to the next generation. In turn, we can imagine that the people living there, seeing the usefulness of the cats, would be nice to them. Maybe they'd put out a bowl of water or allow them into their warm hut where it's dry. In turn, again, the boldest cats, the ones that were willing to do that, would go in and take advantage of that. They would do better. They would have more kittens, pass those genes along. People, in turn, were nice to them. Maybe they were petting them. Kittens, of course, are adorable. And so you could see this coevolutionary dance by which the North African wildcat became more accustomed to living around people and turned into the domestic cat. Next slide. Now, where this actually occurred is debated. Was it somewhere in the Middle East, maybe as long as 10,000 years ago, maybe earlier? We're not sure because we don't have a lot of evidence. Next slide. But one thing that is certain, next slide, is that by 3,500 years ago, cats were domesticated. We can tell that from paintings and carvings in ancient Egypt, which clearly show cats living a domestic lifestyle, wearing a collar around their neck, eating food under a table, and so on. Next slide. So I want to emphasize the domestic cat really is not very different from the North African wildcat. It looks very similar. Its DNA is almost similar. It behaves in many different ways. Next slide. Now, there are some cats today that you would never mistake for a North African wildcat. And these are the colors and shapes and hairstyles that have evolved due to our selection for different types of cats, such as all of these. Next slide. But there are other domestic cats that you could, if you saw them in the African plains, you'd think it's a wildcat because they look just like them. So some cats are very hard to distinguish. Next slide. And in fact, there are only two characteristics that can always distinguish a domestic cat from an African wildcat, that you can count on it to know which one it is. Next slide. And those are how long their intestines are, next slide, and how big their brains are. Domestic cats evolved longer intestines because they eat some grains and vegetable matter as well as the meat that is the exclusive diet of wildcats. And so they evolved longer intestines to digest that food. Also, domestic cats have smaller brains. It's not because they're stupid. Rather, this is something that happens in domesticated animals of all sorts. The part of the brain that makes animals very reactive and very flighty gets smaller because a domestic animal can't afford to react to every sound and so on. So they become more placid, willing to live around people. But those are the only two differences that can absolutely always tell you if you have a domestic cat or a wild cat. And of course, that doesn't do you much good unless you're doing an autopsy. The point being, domestic cats are very slightly different from wild cats. They retain a lot of their ancestral ways. Next slide. This is different from most other domesticated animals, like shown here, which are very different from their ancestors, such as dogs and wolves, pigs and boar, and so on. Next slide. But not cats. They have not changed very much at all. And what that means, next slide, is that they're sometimes called semi-domesticated because they've only changed a little bit. Next slide. And that makes it very easy for a domestic cat to revert to a feral existence. They have all the tools, they have all the instincts, and that's why cats can do just fine on their own. They've retained all their instincts and so on. Next slide. And that, of course, is even true of our pets. And that's why we're here today. The domestic cat, it has a lot of its wild instincts still active. And as you know, they are beautifully adapted hunters, and they still have the instinct to hunt. So that's how we got to the domestic cat today. And with that, I will conclude my talk, and thank you again for the invitation and for listening to me.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. And I thought maybe we would give you a chance to introduce your cat.
Yes, this is Nelson. Here's Nelson right here. He wanted to make sure I got all the facts straight. And so there's Nelson.
That's great. And we had the idea after the fact that maybe when everybody registered, they should bring their cats on if they have one. So we'll do that next time. But for now, I'm going to bring on Grant Sizemore. Grant, are you ready?
I am ready.
Great. So I am going to introduce Grant. Grant is with the American Bird Conservancy. He has a degree in zoology and environmental science from Miami University in Ohio and a master's in wildlife ecology and conservation from the University of Florida. And he's been working in wildlife conservation, policy, education, and research for over 17 years. He's the director of the Invasive Species Program at the American Bird Conservancy, where he runs the Cats Indoors program. And outside of work, he hikes birds and takes care of his indoor cat. I don't know if you have yours on.
I do not. I think she's sleeping on my bed at the moment, but there's a photo of her.
Yes, there's your cat. And what's her name?
That's Amelia Bedelia.
Amelia Bedelia. Love the
Yeah,
names.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Grant, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you everybody for joining in. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about cats, and I'm going to focus on the science surrounding cats and the consequences that cats have in the environment. Basically setting the stage for or taking over from where Jonathan left off. It was a great transition there on how cats are really this semi-domesticated, easily revertible species to a feral state, and the impacts that can lead to in the environment, both in terms of direct impacts to wildlife as well as indirect impacts to wildlife and human communities. So next slide, please. I want to set the stage first with something probably most of you have seen maybe 100 times or more, but just in case you haven't, a 2019 study found that we have lost in the United States and Canada about 3 billion birds since 1970. It is a tremendous decline among even common species. And so we're really grappling with some major losses of avian diversity and trying to figure out what it is that's going on. It's really a whole bunch of different things. Death by a million cuts here. Next slide, please. But the coalition that came together around that study to address the threats to birds identified 7 simple actions that each of us can take. If you'll click, please. American Bird Conservancy works on many of these, and I'm sure many of the folks who are on the webinar today also work on some of these. I'm going to talk a little bit about the portion of keeping cats indoors, which was identified as a major component of bird conservation moving forward, and we'll jump into the science surrounding that. So next slide, please. If I could leave you with just one point today, it's really that cats can make wonderful pets. I mean, you've seen Jonathan's pet, my pet's running around. Cats are great. I've had cats most of my life. But when they run around in the environment, they can cause significant harm to birds and other wildlife. So we have to manage domestic cats appropriately. And click, please. And so that's what leads American Bird Conservancy to the initiation of the Cats Indoors program, which is really dedicated to reducing and hopefully one day eliminating those threats to birds and other wildlife from cats. And we do this through the Cats Indoors program through really two-pronged approach: responsible cat ownership and effective management of unowned cats. Next slide, please. And click. So there are a bunch of different components of the cat management conversation that we have to consider. It really boils down to one simple fact that there are too many domestic cats. And of course, that's the species again, domestic cat, Felis catus. There are too many domestic cats for the number of homes that want one. So we end up with this overabundance or overpopulation of cats relative to the number of people that want a cat. And we end up with cats roaming in the environment. And from that, we have a variety of impacts, direct impacts from predation or nuisances in the environment causing problems with people, disease transmission, cats themselves being at risk for being hit by cars or other things. And of course, we have to consider all of this in the context of the relationship of people and their cats. Of course, cats are, for many of us, a valued member of the family. Next slide, please. So I want to point out that one of the reasons that domestic cats have what we'll see are disproportionately large impacts in the environment is because they are an instinctive predator. They will hunt and kill wildlife regardless of whether or not they are hungry. I mean, it's just part of play behavior that we see with our pet cats. You know, a pet cat that's attacking a feather toy or a ball of string isn't doing that because it's looking to consume that feather toy or consume that ball of string. It's doing that because it's an instinctive prey drive, an instinctive response. We might call it enrichment or play behavior, but that same sort of behavior, when it occurs outside, can be fatal for wildlife. And we know that even well-fed cats will hunt and kill. There's this great study. You can see the photo here of the cat on the top left. That's taken from what's called the Kitty Cam study, which was conducted through the University of Georgia. They attached these little cameras to the collars of cats that were owned cats that had indoor-outdoor access, plenty of food, plenty of water, shelter, and observed what they got up to. And many of them killed animals. You can see some of the images here on the left, eastern phoebe and chipmunk. That wasn't particularly surprising. What was surprising was that they only returned about 23% of the prey to the home. So what that means is that previous studies and impressions by pet owners seriously underestimate the total cat-caused wildlife mortality, that we really have to multiply what we have observed by 4 or 5 times to get a more accurate estimate of that total mortality caused by pet cats. I think it's also important to point out at this point that domestic cats are not operating by the same rules that native predators would. So they are not dependent upon prey populations necessarily for their own survival, for their own population, because they have some luxuries that native predators do not. Pet cats, for example, have plenty of food, plenty of water, reliable shelter, access to veterinary care. I say when a cat doesn't make a kill, it doesn't go hungry, it just goes home. And so this allows for domestic cats to achieve incredibly high densities that result in what has been called hyperpredation in local environments. So you get a huge number of these uh, small but sustained predators sustained by human interaction, hunting for pleasure or sometimes for food in the local environment, and that can lead to some pretty big impacts. There was a study out of North Carolina State University several years ago, which found that cats have 2 to 10 times a greater impact in the local environment than similarly sized native predator, and all of that adds up. As you can see from this graph on the left, this is taken from a 2015 study looking at all the direct human-caused bird mortality threats in the United States. And go ahead and click there, please, Sue. And cats on the far left are estimated to kill about 2.4 billion birds per year. So that makes them the #1 source of direct human-caused bird mortality. And even when a cat doesn't directly kill an animal, we know that the consequences of that interaction with a cat oftentimes are fatal. Research of intakes at wildlife rehabilitation facilities have found that for birds that are brought in as a result of a cat attack, about 80% of them still die. And that's with, professional veterinary care. Many of those are not lucky enough to be found and then taken into a wildlife veterinary hospital. And so do not receive the luxury of that care, and so are even more likely to ultimately perish as a result of that interaction. Next slide, please. So, and go ahead and click, please. That study, which found that cats have killed 2.4 billion birds annually in the United States, is consistent with studies around the world. There have been a handful of studies looking at total cat-caused wildlife mortality among various taxa in other countries. And so you can see consistently, we're talking about hundreds of millions to billions of individual animals in various taxa around the world. Next slide, please. And so as you might imagine, all of this adds up to population level declines and ultimately can lead to species extinctions. So cats have actually been estimated to contribute to the extinction of 63 species of birds, mammals, and reptiles globally. The most famous example probably is of the Stevens Island wren or Lyell's wren in New Zealand, where the introduction of a pet cat led to the quote unquote discovery by Western science of a local species, the Stevens Island wren. And then within 2 years, the species was wiped out by cat predation. So because of all of these impacts, cats are considered to be among the world's most harmful invasive species. Next slide, please. So we've talked about cats as a predator in the environment, but of course, that's not the only way in which they can interact and have consequences in the environment when they are roaming outside. There are a variety of parasites and diseases that cats can carry and transmit to other domestic animals, other wildlife, or to wildlife, or to people. Two of these zoonotic diseases are rabies and toxoplasmosis. And so cats are the top carrier of rabies among domestic animals in the United States. They have replaced dogs as of about 30 years ago, 40 years ago. They became the top carrier of rabies. We've done a very good job with addressing dog rabies in terms of dog control. We have not done that so much with cats in the United States. Cats are disproportionately more likely to expose people to rabies than wildlife, in part because you're more likely to try to interact with a cat, an unknown cat of unknown rabies vaccination history, than you are a raccoon or a fox or a skunk, for example. And then toxoplasmosis is a really interesting disease. It's caused by infection with the parasite Toxoplasma gondii. This parasite relies on felines, so not just domestic cats, any felid, but relies on felines to sexually reproduce. It can only complete its life cycle in the gut of a feline. So in a domestic cat, it will reproduce in the gut. It will then be excreted into the environment via feces on the order of up to hundreds of millions of tiny infectious eggs called oocysts. These oocysts can then persist in the environment and remain infectious in freshwater, marine, or terrestrial environments for months to years, where it can subsequently infect any bird or mammal, basically. And then it can move through the ecosystem through transmission from intermediate host to intermediate host. Ultimately, though, the goal for the parasite is to go back into a feline and complete its life cycle. This is the second leading cause of death among foodborne illnesses in the United States. It is a serious risk for pregnant women. It's why they are advised not to change cat litter when they're pregnant. But it's also a serious risk for anybody who is immune compromised. And so it can lead to miscarriages and fetal deformities, blindness, deafness, intellectual disabilities, organ failure, even death. It's a really cool, fascinating parasite. I don't have time to really go into all the details now. But it's a serious concern with cats roaming in the environment for the likelihood of environmental contamination. Next slide, please. So again, I want to just reiterate that overall message. This is nothing against cats. Cats are wonderful little animals. I've had cats most of my life. But when they are roaming outdoors, they have consequences for native wildlife, for human health, for neighbor relations, and for the health and welfare of the cat as well. So American Bird Conservancy is promoting the idea that it's time to treat cats like we treat dogs, be responsible for them in their ownership, and choose responsible management solutions. Next slide, please. So what can you do? Next slide, or click. First and foremost, please practice responsible cat ownership. We would define that as one, keeping your cat under your control, not necessarily in the home, but on a leash, in a catio, just not roaming the environment. And then also sterilization, unless you purposely intend to responsibly breed that animal. Vaccination for rabies, identification in case that cat should become lost. All of these are part of the responsible cat ownership package. Next, please. After that, please educate yourself and your neighbors and your community about the risks and consequences associated with cats outdoors, and really the solutions associated with keeping cats indoors, the benefits to cats and the community. Next, please. And there are plenty of opportunities to advocate for responsible policies in your community. It could be as simple as adding "and cats" wherever you have ordinances in place for dogs. But please see American Bird Conservancy's website for action alerts and other notifications for chances to make a difference in your community. Next, please. So that's it for me. I will stick around. Of course, we'll have a Q&A later. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Grant. That's really helpful, and we appreciate that valuable information. And now we're going to move to our next speaker, speakers, I might say, because we have two, although one will speak and the other will not, but we're excited to have them both. So I'm excited to present to you Albert and Mia. Albert is a member of the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants. He's the founder of Outdoor Bengal, a platform that is committed to offering adventure and training solutions for cat parents. And his mission is inspired by his Bengal cat Mia. And his mission is to enrich the lives of felines and their owners through engaging activities. Albert has been expertise in cat training, and his passion for exploration have cultivated a really vibrant community, and it's how I found him. I was looking on the web for people who could offer us with some practical solutions to keeping our cats entertained but away from birds. And so he has a large following, over 500,000 cat lovers He's also the writer of the Click Crusade, a card game to help parents teach tricks to their cats. And he has a variety of materials that he's going to donate a few to our prize winners. So we're looking forward to hearing more about his cat harnesses and other materials that he uses with cats. So with that, Albert, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Very happy to be here. And if today's webinar helps to prevent another cat from getting lost and enriching the lives of a few more while keeping birds and local fauna safe, I think I will be able to consider today a success. So if we go to the next slide, another one. So when I was thinking what's one of the biggest impacts in that cats have when they leave the home? Obviously, there's a very obvious one. There's one that comes really quickly to mind, which is the impact that that has on the family that's losing a pet, the impact on the cat itself that will never go back home. According to Animal Humane Society, about 10 million pets are lost every year only in North America, and a big fraction of those are cats. And compared to dogs, those cats that are lost are much more unlikely to go back home. And this it's in link with what Jonathan was saying. Cats are amazing hunters. They're extra prepared to survive in the environment, and they're going to be less likely to try to find their way back home if they have an enriched and full life outside. And the impact of these cats staying outside, it's massive also in the environment. If they become feral or stray. We go to the next slide. I want to share a very short story about how all this started. I'm from Spain. I moved to the US in 2019, and it was a very tough year for me. In 2019, we broke up with my partner. My dad passed, and then COVID hit, and I was in the US on my own. And for the first time in my life, I was like, I need a partner. I need somebody to go through this period with me. And it's when I decided to get Mia, my Bengal cat. And as everybody else during confinement, I was craving to be outside. And I promised myself that once I started going out again, I would do it with my cat. And on trying to do so, I realized how little there was materials or products to help cat people take their cats outdoors safely. And that's when Outdoor Bengal was born. And as Susan introduced, we have had more than 100 million views on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, and we have sold more than 40,000 cat harnesses today in only 5 years. So huge success. There's a lot of people that want to achieve this, and my objective is to help as many people as possible to take their cats outdoors. Go to the next one. So my objective today in this short presentation is to debunk three myths that Grant and Jonathan already helped me with some of them. So that's very useful because they have all the science background and I just have stories. But debunking three big myths that prevent cats from going outdoors safely. The first one, if you click once, it's that keeping my cat indoors is safe and kind. And it is. Many people have very happy cats indoors, but the reality is that cats crave the outdoors. Cats will chirp and try to hunt anything that gets inside the home. Cats are obese when they don't have enough enrichment. They go on zoomies. So the reality is that cats indoors, they're very safe, but they're not usually as enriched as they should. If we go to the next one, then some people are like, okay, I understand that my cat will be maybe happier if they have contact with the outdoors, but leash training a cat, it's cruel or it's unnatural. And I love that sentence that Grant said, which was, we need to start treating cats like we treat dogs. We have the two extremes with cats. We have people that will keep them indoors and will pamper them and will prevent them to have any interaction whatsoever with the outside. And then we have people that are like, no, cats are happier outdoors and they just let the cat go in and out as much as they want. They don't really put anything in place to prevent that cat from harming themselves or harming other animals in the environment. And I think that there's a very nice middle ground. And then the third myth is the one that I hear the most. Oh, my cat would never. My cat is untrainable. I've heard this so many times, and I I can prove it's wrong if you give me 5 minutes. So let's go to the next slide. I want to deep a little deeper into the myth number one that keeping cats indoors is safe and kind by sharing one story. So if you press one, when I first brought Mia home, she spent hours just staring through the window, trying to engage with anything that was live inside the home. If a fly would come in, she would break havoc. She would go nuts to try to get that fly. As Jonathan was saying, her prey instinct was huge. And I just realized how much she was craving for the outdoors. So if we click once more, and I remember this one day, my friends had a barbecue. We were starting to gather together after COVID. And I was like, Mia was tiny. She was 16 weeks. I just finished all her vaccinations. It was safe for her to be outside. I didn't know much about cats at the time. And I was like, I'll just take her with me. She stays close to me all the time. And when I first tried to place her outside, she was not super eager. So she just sat in my lap. And before I noticed, she got comfortable enough that she disappeared. And if you click once more, that's the first time I lost my cat. I have had her for 3 weeks. I was extremely ashamed. I was at a barbecue with about 10 friends, and I had to step aside, ask for a computer, and start printing posters trying to get my cat back. I finally recovered her, but only 2% of cats that end up in a shelter are recovered because they're not microchipped, because cats can go far, because people might take them into their homes and never return them, or because they die. If you click once more. So the truth here and the myth that I want to debunk is that indoors, it's an environment that's depleted of life and it's optimized for us to be safe, but it's not enriching enough for cats. And oftentimes cats will just try to seek the outdoors where all this excitement happens. If we go to the next slide, myth number two, and click once more, please. This one is interesting because I go with me outside a lot on a leash, and it's something that doesn't leave anybody indifferent. There's people that will look at us with amusement, and there's going to be people that's going to look at us with disgust, even. I remember this one time that a man yelled at me, "Get a dog!" And I was like, but I like cats. And also, she's perfectly fine walking on a leash. If you click once more, the reality here is that the cruel thing, or what I believe is the cruel thing, is to just open the door and let the cat go outside. And even for those who until today don't understand or did not understand the impact that that has on the fauna, it's extremely dangerous for cats to be outside. There's dogs, there's plenty of predators because cats, unlike dogs, dogs are apex predators, and in most environments, a dog will not be hunted by anything. But cats are small mammals, and there's a huge variety of animals that will try to hunt them down as food. Then there's scars, there's bird flu, there's so many things that can kill a cat. Once more. And when you take your cat with you, the bond that you develop with your cat and the freedom that you get from being able to not leave your cat behind when you go on trips, when you go on vacations, it's nothing but a show of love and affection. It has nothing to do with being cruel. So the myth number two is that if you go press one more, please. It's that walking your cat is going to give them both safety and freedom. And to me, it's the ultimate act of love. It's not cruel or unnatural. And finally, the third myth, it's that my cat is untrainable. And this one is one that I meet with a lot because we produce social media content, and I am dedicating my life to training cats, both just to do tricks and to optimize coexistence at home, but also to help people take their cats outside. And I have seen hundreds, thousands of cats that can achieve it. And when people tell me that their cat is not trainable, if you press one more, Susan, please. I will put you an example. What happens when you open the fridge? Or what happens when you take a bag that sounds like a bag of treats? Or what happens when you open a can of tuna? Your cat knows 100% that there's a tax that you have to pay every time that you eat something that they like. And that is proof that cats are very smart and they can be trained. In fact, we're training them even when we're not trying to. And they know that if they meow at a certain pitch, you're going to wake up. They know that if they paw at the door, you're going to open it. They know that they basically are trainable, and they're so good at training that sometimes they train us. If you press once more. Then the problem comes, and it happened to me when I first started walking me on a leash. The problem starts with the harness. Most harnesses that are in the market are bulky, they're uncomfortable, and when the cat first wears the harness, they tend to freeze, they don't want to move, and this is because they're uncomfortable. At the beginning, when I started training Mia, I was very not worried, but I was not convinced that it was going to work. And when I first put the harness on her, she froze. And then I was like, wait, but she's very food driven. What happens if I toss a treat? And I tossed the treat, and she completely forgot that she was wearing a harness and chased that treat. And the reality is that if you just put a harness and do nothing about it, the cat all the cat can think about is that they're wearing a harness. But if you engage in playtime or if you use treats to entice movement, the cat is going to start moving and getting comfortable. The other thing is some people will start training their cats and put the harness on and just take them outside without any acclimatation whatsoever. And for a cat, particularly that's not a kitten and that has spent most of their life indoors, if you just place a harness on them and take them outside, they're going to be terrified. So there's a slow process that needs to happen for your cat to transition from not wearing harnesses to wearing harnesses, from wearing harnesses to being comfortable wearing a leash, from being comfortable indoors to being able to go outdoors, and from being outdoors to being able to be around people, around cars, around dogs. Like there's a process and it has to be done slowly. So also keeping expectations in line with your cat's ability and the training that has happened. And if you click once more, this is something that I've particularly worked on is trying to create a harness that's almost unnoticeable for the cat. And just like me, there are other brands, like this is not just to advertise my brand, but harnesses have evolved a lot since we started 5 years ago. And today it's easier than ever to take your cat outdoors. So I really encourage you to try it. The only people I will believe that say they cannot train their cat are those people that have tried it at least for a month. Otherwise, like, don't come and tell me that you cannot train your cat. It's totally doable. Um, so if you click a couple times, Susan, um, one more, you can press 3 times. Let's show all of them. So the process is very simple. And after this slide, there's a QR code that you can scan and download a full guide that I offer for free to everybody that wants to try it. But basically, the process is very simple. Get a light harness, get a harness that's going to be comfortable on your cat, and put the harness in places that your cat usually is around. This will allow the cat to spread some pheromones on the harness, and the harness won't smell like factory, it won't smell like chemicals or new fabric. It's going to have their own pheromones, and that's basically a post-it saying, hey, this is safe. Then place the harness on. Once your cat is just comfortable around the harness, you can place the harness on for short periods at a time and use playtime and treats to just get your cat comfortable just wearing the harness. Don't attach the leash yet. We're just trying to get your cat comfortable having something on them. And finally, attaching the leash. Once your cat can wear a harness and you can toss treats around and your cat can walk around the house wearing the harness without being uncomfortable, you can attach the leash. The leash is going to make it extra uncomfortable because for the first time in their lives, they're going to be limited in terms of movement. And there's also a learning period that happens while wearing the leash. My recommendation is always to try indoors, make sure that you can walk your cat in a way that they cannot escape the harness. And once you're comfortable indoors, your cat is comfortable indoors, then you can take your cat outside. And you should do it in a place that there are no noises, there are no cars, there's no people. And ideally, if it's a natural environment, it's going to be much more likely for your cat to enjoy the experience. And that's it for me. If you want to get the guide, here's a QR code. Otherwise, I believe there's going to be an email that can be shared. You can just send me an email and I will make sure that the guide arrives to you if the QR code is not working.
Thank you so much, Albert. That was fascinating and great to see Mia. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring all of our guest speakers on. If Grant, if you could turn on your camera, and give all of you a chance to ask your questions. We'll go through some of the questions in the chat, but if you want to put any in the chat right now, that would be excellent. So if you could, in the meantime, if you could mute yourself, we'd appreciate that. So I'm going to go to a first question, and just a kind of a fun one that would be for Albert. But how do you manage walking multiple cats?
That's a very good one. And when training cats or walking cats, my advice is don't start walking your cat, let your cat walk you. And with two cats, that's particularly important. There's a lot of videos on the internet, and I include myself, that are displaying very trained cats that can follow you on a trail. But at the beginning, the main objective of having the cat outside is to enrich their lives. And I would try to focus on not imposing and just trying to keep your cat and the fauna and the environment safe. The objective is just to let them smell and have fun and be outside. And little by little, you're going to be able to communicate with your cat and getting them to do what you want. With two cats, it's exactly the same. Like if you try to get two cats to go where you want to go, it's just not gonna happen. So it's more about just letting your cats have fun and enjoy outside. Said that, once your cats are comfortable, treats can go a long way. But there's something called competing stimuli. And when your cats have to decide between chasing a bird or chasing a smell or your treats might not be strong enough to convince your cat to come to you. So start in environments where your cat doesn't have as much competing stimuli. So maybe if you have a garage that's inert and there's no fauna and no noises and no smells, you can train them there to follow you. And then once they're comfortable following you in an environment that doesn't have competing stimuli, then you can try to transition into an environment in which you're going to be competing with everything else.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that information. And I'm going to give a, this one will be for Jonathan Murray Burgess, who is an author herself, and wrote the wonderful children's book called Sparrow Loves Birds. Says, thanks for the great information. The Cat's Meow is a wonderful book, thinking about adopting it for my animal behavior course. What made you think of writing The Cat's Meow, Jonathan?
Well, it actually started as a course I taught for freshmen. I realized, I didn't know this originally, but I realized there's a lot of research being done on domestic cats, the same sort of thing, the same sort of approaches that my colleagues and I take to study lizards, elephants, and whatever. And I had the idea of teaching a class to freshmen called The Science of Cats. And the idea was to lure the students in with their love of cats and then teach them how we study nature, how we study wildlife, just using cats as the vehicle. And so I think that the class was certainly lots of fun. I think was successful. And so it wasn't much of a leap to go from that to why not write a book to tell people this, it's the same thing, how we study nature, how we know what we know about cats.
Thanks. Well, it's a great book, and I do encourage everyone to go out and purchase it, read it, and enjoy learning about your cat and also its impacts. I'm going to turn the next one over to Grant. Grant, we had a number of questions that I saw you answered in the chat. But I know here in Colorado, we had a challenge with some policy being passed through our state that is allowing support for feral cats. I wanted to know if you had any advice for how we can get ahead of this in our communities. How can we put policies in place that help keep our cats and our birds safe at the same time?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sadly, there are a lot of what I call regressive policies that are being implemented across the United States out of a misguided effort to reduce euthanasia of cats. But unfortunately, the strategy that they're implementing, trap, neuter, release, sacrifices native wildlife and causes nuisances in the community and creates conflicts between neighbors. Very few people want to have a feral cat colony located in their backyard. So one of the things that we can do is to educate policymakers in advance of these policies coming forward, establish partnerships with veterinarians to educate their clients. Again, that's consistent with the AVMA position statement on owned cats. Keep them inside, please. We can also provide opportunities for alternatives to the release part. Maybe putting cats into giant catios, for example, sanctuaries, these sorts of things. And really what we should start with is not only responsible pet ownership ourselves, but encouraging responsible pet ownership in the community, because no matter what we do with the stray and feral cat population, if we don't get the owned cat population under control, we're never going to solve the stray and feral cat population, because these, as we've seen, pet cats can become stray or feral pretty easily. So we have to, what we frequently call, turn off the tap on a flooding house. So we have to get that pet cat population under control.
Thank you, Grant. And I see lots of other comments in here about leash training your cats. And one comment came from Avril from Mexico, and she's commenting on the number of feral dogs in the streets. Different stages of awareness and interest or ability to educate the communities about keeping pets indoors, including dogs, cats. Um, What's the evolution of this has, and I've seen it in the United States and Latin America, how we've gotten more careful about our dogs. How do we get that same feeling for cats? It's a really hard one because people think of cats differently from their dogs. They, in some cases, to me, seem more dispensable to some people. So if any of you could comment on that.
That's the
I, I
question.
yeah, I can go. I have seen people, I think it was on my second myth. There's a lot of people that believe that cats are not meant to be leashed, and that has two solutions on most people. One is not letting the cats go outside at all. The other one is just opening the door and letting the cat explore at their own will. And we basically have been fed this narrative that cats are low maintenance animals, and they are not. Cats are extremely persistent, extremely loud, and a lot less accommodating than dogs are. And the thing is that many people just find easier allowing the cat to do whatever the cat wants rather than trying to set boundaries, just because cats are a lot less domesticated than dogs are. And I think that part of the problem with cats comes from one, the belief that it's not possible and many people don't try. And second, it's that it's harder to train a cat than to train a dog, and it's harder to say no to a cat than it is to say no to a dog.
Thank you, Albert. Anybody else want to take a stab at that?
All I'll say is, our organization frequently says we need to elevate the level of care and control that we provide to cats to the same that we do with dogs. I think, especially since we've had the innovation of cat litter, there's no reason that we have to let cats just roam outdoors. And clearly, there are responsible ways to do it, to have a cat be outside, as Albert is showcasing.
Thanks, Grant. Jonathan, do you have any additions to that?
Well, one minor point is that many dog owners let their dogs out into their backyard. It's easy to contain a dog. It's much harder to keep a cat in your backyard.
Exactly. Exactly. And thanks for the comment. Someone put in the chat box about these Birds Be Safe cat collars. which I know Grant responded to that as well by saying that the cat collars can help reduce wildlife mortality, but they don't solve all the problems. So for birds in the nest or fledglings, they can't escape even if they do see a cat. So it doesn't limit predation at night or limit parasite disease transmission or keep cats safe or reduce nuisances. So they can help, but they're not the solution. So that's really good to know. Overall, everybody's just very excited to hear you talk about this. I haven't seen too many webinars that have focused on cats. It can be a challenging issue, and everybody's passionate about their cats, but I appreciate you all being willing to take this on. So thank you very much. And what I'd like to do now is just, in a fun way, is share our cat competition winners so you can see who won our prizes. And thanks to those of you who participated in this. We ask that you send in your information and your photos so that we can select a winner. And it's just been a really fun activity. So that one of the prizes goes to Carrie Sondage from Sioux City, Iowa, with her cat Freya safely enjoying the outdoors on a harness and a leash, even climbing a tree. So I don't know how high you let that cat get up there, Carrie, but thanks so much for what you're doing. And you'll receive a goodie bag from us and with a little something from Albert and Mia as well. And our second winner is, and I don't speak Portuguese, so I apologize, Bruna Paino Barros from Sao Paulo, Brazil, who wrote that in the middle of the city of Sao Paulo, they see parrots, parakeets, and tanagers in the trees from their window, and they attract the attention of their cats who are clearly interested, but are also clearly away from the birds. So thank you to Bruna for taking care of your cats and letting them only watch but not taste the birds. With that, I will remind you that on Wednesday, June 18th, please note that we're changing the day because the Thursday, the 19th, is a holiday. So this webinar will be held on the 18th. We'll be talking about the importance of native plants and your garden to birds. So we hope you can join us then. Thanks again to our speakers. Thank you again, Albert, Jonathan, Grant. We really appreciate the work that you do for cats, for birds, and for bird conservation. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
All right, and we can stop the recording.